I was sitting there in my parents' cozy living room in suburban Chicago, trying to keep my face as neutral as possible. Outside, a light snow was falling, and inside, the air smelled of roasted turkey and the low hum of distant relatives chatting. It looked just like a perfect Thanksgiving picture. Except, for me, it felt more like the set of a horror movie. My parents and my older sister, Emily, had just cornered me in the quieter spot by the fireplace, away from the main group. My mom was looking at me with this anxious expression, but I knew it was just for show. My dad was serious, holding a thick stack of papers in his hand. Emily was standing behind them, fidgeting, looking like she was the victim of the entire world, not the person who had put me in this situation. "Sarah," my dad started, using the tone he only ever used when he was about to give an order or deliver important news. "We need to talk, right now." I nodded, my heart starting to pound. I'd felt like something was off from the moment they called and practically begged me to come home for Thanksgiving, something they rarely did unless they needed something. Dad placed the stack of papers in my hands. "These are papers related to the old family house outside of town," he said, pointing to the first page. "There's a substantial mortgage on it, and it's in your name." I took the papers, my eyes scanning the first few lines. The bold print jumped out at me. Mortgage agreement, borrower, Sarah Peterson, principal amount $500,000, $500,000 in my name. On the old house I'd moved out of nearly 10 years ago. My brain seemed to just shut down for a few seconds. My hands started to shake. I looked up at their faces. My dad nodded, like this was somehow obvious. My mom squeezed his arm, her eyes still holding that fake anxiety. Emily looked down at the floor. What is this?" My voice cracked. "Emily needed the money for her business," my mom said softly. "You know, her startup is having a little bit of a rough start. Things are just more expensive than she thought." Startup. The handmade candle shop Emily had opened 6 months ago and then closed because she'd spent all the money on interior decorating and inspiration trips to Europe. "Rough start?" I repeated, trying to process. $500,000? I don't understand. Why is it in my name?" That's when Emily finally looked up. Her eyes were red, and she looked genuinely distraught, though I suspected it was more about the money than about me. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she mumbled. "I needed the money quickly. Mom and Dad said it would be easier if it was in your name, because you have such good credit. I thought everything would be fine, I'd pay it back. But now?" My dad cut her off. "The point is, the bank is calling. Emily can't pay it back. They said if we don't make payments, they'll foreclose on the old house." Then he looked straight into my eyes with that look of authority that didn't allow for arguments. "Sarah, you need to take care of this. The $500,000. It's your duty to your family. It's your responsibility to your sister. You have a stable career, you can afford it." And then something unexpected happened. Instead of praying, instead of begging for an explanation, instead of screaming in anger, I started to laugh. A dry, harsh laugh. A laugh born of bitterness, of disbelief, of pain so deep it manifested as this absurd, uncontrollable sound. I laughed as if they had just told me the most ridiculous, cruel joke in the world. I laughed and watched their stunned faces. They stared at me like I was insane. My mom's fake anxiety vanished, replaced by annoyance. My dad scowled in anger. Emily looked genuinely scared now. "Duty?" I said, the laughter still catching in my throat. "Responsibility? $500,000 for Emily's candle shop? Are you kidding me?" They didn't answer. They just stared. In that moment, amidst my laughter, tears started streaming down my face. Tears not of fear or regret about the money, tears of betrayal, of cruelty. Because I realized, yet again, that I was just a means to an end for them. A bank account to drain, a name to use when they needed something. And I knew right then and there that the fight had begun. A fight not just for the money, but for my dignity, for the truth, and most importantly, for my freedom from this toxic family. I took a deep breath, stopped laughing, and the frozen smile on my face turned into a cold, hard smirk. "Okay," I said, "we'll talk about it, but not now, and not on your terms." I placed the stack of papers on the coffee table, right next to the mashed potatoes, and turned around. I didn't say another word to the relatives who were staring at me with curious, judging eyes. I walked straight to the door, grabbed my coat, and drove away. Sitting in my car, a few miles from my parents' house, I pulled over to the side of the road. The shaking finally hit me. I was freezing, and not just from the cold outside. $500,000, a massive debt in my name that I didn't know about, that I didn't benefit from 1 cent. I'm Sarah Peterson. I'm 35 years old. I live hundreds of miles away from my family, in a different city, where I've built my own career as a financial consultant. I worked incredibly hard to get where I am, to have a stable life, a decent little apartment, a solid savings account. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm financially independent, something I've always been proud of. My family. They never really seemed to appreciate that. To them, I was always the daughter who was too independent, almost cold, who didn't understand family sacrifice like Emily did. Emily, my older sister by 2 years, was always the darling, the one who needed protecting. Everything good, all the attention went to Emily. Whatever she wanted, she got financial leeway. Mistakes were excused. Me? I had to figure things out on my own. That created an invisible wall between me and them, a wall I now saw was deeper than I ever imagined. How did they trick me into getting that signature? I racked my brain. The old house, right. About a year ago, my parents had asked me to come back for a weekend to sign some papers related to transferring ownership or updating land records to simplify things later on. They said because my name was still on some old deeds from my grandparents' time, they needed my signature to make everything clear. At the time, I was swamped with a major project at work. I came home for less than 24 hours. My parents gave me a stack of papers. They pointed out where I needed to sign, talked quickly about what it was, and kept rushing me because they had other things to do. I stupidly trusted them. I didn't read every single line. I just skimmed, saw titles that seemed related to the old house property, and signed. I remember signing quite a few places. They even made some joke about signing fast so you can relax. Now, looking back at that mortgage document, I realized how incredibly sophisticated the trap was. They didn't just slip the mortgage paper into that stack number. It was worse. I remembered another time, a few years prior, when I'd signed a power of attorney for my parents, so they could handle some small administrative tasks for me while I was living far away. I'd completely forgotten about that paper. And I realized, looking at how my signature on that mortgage document was notarized, that wasn't the rushed signature I'd scribbled a year ago. That was a signature that looked perfect. Identical to the signature on my college diploma on my ID. They had used my old power of attorney. They had leveraged my trust to that extent. They had gone to a notary, used my POA, which might have been expired or used outside its original scope, and signed my name on this massive mortgage document. Or they had me sign a blank paper under the POA, telling me it was for signature practice, and then somehow use that signature on the mortgage. There are many ways to commit fraud with a POA and signatures if you are ruthless enough. Rage surged through me. They hadn't just tricked me into signing. They had deliberately used a legal instrument I gave them out of trust to fraudulently put a huge debt in my name. This was beyond simple favoritism. This was outright financial fraud. I drove straight to the nearest hotel, booked a room, and started making calls. The first call was to David, an old friend from law school, now a real estate and financial litigation lawyer. I told him the story through tears and fury. David listened intently. He told me to take pictures of all the papers I had and send them to him immediately. He also emphasized the complexity of the case. Sarah, if they used a power of attorney, we have to prove they misused it, or that it was expired, or that you had no knowledge of this transaction. The bank might also be negligent for lending based on questionable documentation. This is going to be a very difficult and expensive legal battle. For the next few days, I lived in a nightmare. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. The images of my parents and Emily's faces kept flashing in my mind. The pain of their betrayal sliced at my heart like broken glass. Family. That sacred word suddenly felt empty and disgusting. I cried. I cried a lot in that cold hotel room. I cried for my naivete, for my trust being shattered, for the family relationship that was utterly destroyed. I felt more alone than ever. The people who were supposed to be my support system were the very ones who had stabbed me in the back. But with every tear I shed, some fear was washed away, replaced by a colder, harder feeling. They thought I would break. They thought I would be scared and accept my fate, selling my assets to pay off Emily's debt. They thought I would grit my teeth and endure this for the sake of family duty. They were wrong, completely wrong. I wasn't the little Sarah who craved her parents' approval anymore. I was Sarah Peterson, a grown, independent woman who had built everything herself. I wouldn't let anyone, not even my family, take it all away. The pain turned into anger, and the anger solidified into an ironclad resolve. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would counterattack. I would expose their true faces. I would demand justice not just for myself, but for the person I had been, the one they had trampled on for years. They thought I would stay silent and pay. They were wrong. They had awakened a person they never thought existed. The pressure from my family escalated after Thanksgiving. They called constantly. My dad, "Where are you? Why did you leave like that? Come home right now. We need to talk seriously about this debt." My mom, "Sarah, you're disappointing me so much. Your sister is suffering terribly. Don't you care about your sister? Help her this one time, dear. This is blood." Emily, "Sis, I know you're mad at me, but I had no other choice. If you don't help, the whole family will lose the house. You're the only one who can save us. You can't abandon me and mom and dad, and even Michael, my brother. He was the least involved in the family's financial messes, but he'd always been the reluctant peacemaker." This time, his voice was also full of accusation. "Sarah, you're overreacting. She's your sister, after all. Just talk things through. Why did you leave like that? Mom and Dad are really worried about you. Worried about me? Or worried about my wallet? Worried about the $500,000 debt in my name?" They started spreading their version of the story within the extended family. Sarah was the ungrateful daughter, rich but stingy, who wouldn't help her family in need, abandoning her parents and sister to face foreclosure. A few relatives called me, their tone a mix of prying and accusation. "Sarah, I heard you're having some difficulties with your parents' house. You should really think about your parents and sister. Family is the most important thing." The rage in me simmered. They weren't just stealing from me, they were actively trying to ruin my reputation. David and I worked nonstop. I dug through every old paper, email, text message. David contacted the bank, which was incredibly difficult since I wasn't the direct borrower listed, technically, to try and get details about the mortgage. Who signed it? Based on what paperwork? The process of finding proof of fraud felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. They had been too careful. The papers looked legal. The signature looked like mine, if they used the POA or a cleverly placed signature. Proving intent to deceive was the biggest challenge. But I didn't give up. I used my own financial consulting skills to dig deeper into Emily's and my parents' financial history over the past few years. As I delved deeper into bank transactions, public debt records, if any, and documents related to Emily's startup, a chilling truth slowly emerged that $500,000 wasn't just used for Emily to open a candle shop and burn through it. A significant portion of it had been transferred into Emily's account, and from there, a substantial chunk was mysteriously moved again. David and I decided to hire a financial private investigator. His job was to follow the money trail. And we found twist too. The money hadn't just served Emily. A significant portion of it, about $150,000, had been transferred to Michael. Michael wasn't neutral or just worried about the family, as he'd presented himself. He was complicit. It turned out Michael had a serious online gambling problem. He had accumulated massive debts. My parents had used part of the mortgage money in my name to bail him out, to prevent him from being sued or getting into bigger trouble. I felt like I was collapsing. It wasn't just Emily, it was Michael too. And my parents had covered it all up. They didn't just scam me for Emily. They scammed me to save Michael too, to hide his dark secret, and potentially their own financial secrets as well. The old house might have been carrying other debts I wasn't aware of. The feeling of betrayal was now tripled. I wasn't just betrayed by my parents and sister. I was betrayed by my brother, who I thought at least had some shred of decency. They were a unit willing to drain me dry to save themselves and maintain a facade of respectability to the outside world. My anger had now solidified into a cold, hard block of resentment. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't feel the pain in the same way. There was only an iron resolve and a burning desire for justice. Michael called me, his voice full of fake remorse after I confronted him about the money. I didn't reveal how I knew. He said, "Sarah, I'm sorry. I was in a bad spot. Mom and Dad helped me out. Can you just let it go for me? This is still family." "Family?" I asked, my voice ice cold. "Your family used my name, my reputation, my trust, to cover up your mistakes and debts. That's not a family. That's a criminal enterprise." I didn't wait for his reply. I hung up. I understood it now. This wasn't about Emily needing money for a startup. This was about my entire family, from my parents to Emily and Michael, living on debt, secrets, and lies. And when everything was about to crash, they were willing to sacrifice the only one of them who lived honestly and independently, just to save themselves. They kept up the pressure. My mom even faked being sick, demanding I come home to take care of her. My dad threatened to expose my ungratefulness on social media or to my colleagues. Emily texted, saying she was so desperate she was contemplating suicide. I knew it was a blatant lie to manipulate me. I didn't answer any of their calls or texts. I blocked their numbers. I only communicated via formal email through their lawyer. Yes, they had hired a lawyer to force me to pay the debt, or my lawyer, David. Their lawyer sent a final demand letter. I had to start making payments on the mortgage within 30 days, or they would file a lawsuit against me. I smiled when I read that email. They thought they were cornering me. They had no idea how ready I was. David had been incredibly efficient. He discovered a significant loophole in the bank's procedure when they accepted my power of attorney. It seemed the POA had either expired at the time of signing or was not properly notarized for such a large mortgage transaction. Furthermore, based on the evidence the investigator gathered about where the money went, we could argue that this loan showed signs of organized fraud. David advised me to arrange a formal meeting with my parents, Emily, Michael, and their lawyer, if they wished, at his office. This was the last chance to resolve things peacefully, on my terms, before going to court. I agreed. Meeting day. I walked into David's office. My parents, Emily, and Michael were already sitting there with their lawyer, Mr. Davies, an older gentleman looking arrogant and self-satisfied. They looked at me with a challenging gaze. It seemed they thought just sitting across from me with their lawyer would be enough to intimidate me into agreeing to pay the debt. Mr. Davies spoke first. "Ms. Peterson, my clients have stated their wishes clearly. This mortgage loan is legally in your name. We demand you begin payments immediately to avoid unnecessary legal complications." I sat down, facing them, feeling strangely calm. David sat beside me. I didn't say anything, just looked straight into the eyes of each member of my family. Before we talk about payments, I began, my voice low, steady, and clear, completely different from the choked voice I had at Thanksgiving. I want to present a few things. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't accusing. I presented the facts step by step, like a financial consultant analyzing a complex fraud case. First, I said, looking directly at my parents, you used my power of attorney, which was drawn up for minor administrative purposes, to sign a $500,000 mortgage. That power of attorney had expired at the time of signing, or it was used beyond its granted authority. David provided the legal documentation supporting this claim. This constitutes financial fraud and forgery. My parents' faces started to pale. Mr. Davies interrupted. Objection! That power of attorney was perfectly valid. Oh? I smirked. Well then, let's listen to this recording, shall we? This was the decisive blow. During the investigation, the private investigator hadn't just followed the money, he had also found a way to gather more evidence. Using some legally permissible techniques, like recording conversations in public spaces or where consent rules allowed, he had managed to obtain a recording of a conversation between my parents and Emily just a few days before that awful Thanksgiving. I pressed play on my phone, connected to a small Bluetooth speaker. My mom's voice filled the room, full of anxious urgency. I just hope Sarah doesn't look too closely at the papers. We told her it was just updating the deed. If she finds out about the mortgage... My dad's voice dismissive. She won't. She never reads anything I give her. She's too busy with her fancy job. Just make sure you get her signature. Emily's voice whining. But what if she asks questions? And the bank said they needed proof she agreed to the loan amount, not just the signing authority. Dad's voice hardening. Just tell her it's standard paperwork for the house. Say it clears things up for when the time comes. He clearly meant when they pass away, implying this was somehow supposed to make inheriting easier, twisting the truth even further. And make sure that bank official doesn't get suspicious about the POA. I told them she was out of town and wanted me to handle it. Mom's voice again. And the money? Did you transfer that part to Michael yet? He's calling again, frantic about his debts. Emily. Yes, Mom, I sent him $150,000 yesterday, just like you said. I kept the rest for the shop, but it's going so fast. What are we going to do if Sarah doesn't agree to pay the mortgage? The bank wants payments next month. Dad. She, Mom, just make sure she understands this saves the click. I stopped the recording. Silence hung heavy in the room, thick with shame and exposure. My parents were ashen. Emily had her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Real tears this time, I suspected, but not for me. Michael looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Mr. Davies was sputtering, visibly shaken, his arrogance replaced by frantic damage control. This recording is inadmissible. It's an invasion of privacy. It was obtained illegally. Actually, Mr. Davies, David said calmly, stepping in. Mention a plausible state law, i.e. Illinois law regarding consent in certain recording situations or public space recording rules. This recording is perfectly admissible as evidence of conspiracy to commit financial fraud and intent to deceive. Your clients freely admitted their scheme. I stood up, looking down at them. My voice was steady, resonating with the strength I had found. There it is, I said. The truth, you didn't need my help. You deliberately, meticulously planned to use my name, my credit, my signature, forged or obtained through deception, to take out a massive loan for your own purposes, to fund Emily's failed business and Michael's gambling debts, and then planned to dump the consequences entirely on me under the guise of family duty. I wasn't done. This was my moment. The culmination of years of being sidelined, of being the responsible one they took for granted, of being just a resource. You talk about family duty? I asked, my voice rising slightly, filled with righteous indignation. Where was your duty to me when you were planning this? Where was your responsibility when you were signing my name away? Where was the blood is thicker than water when you were actively trying to ruin my financial future and my reputation? I looked at my parents. You didn't care about saving the house. You cared about saving yourselves from the consequences of your own bad decisions and your favoritism. You sacrificed me, your own daughter, without a second thought. I looked at Emily. You weren't desperate. You were entitled. You expected me to bail you out of a mess you created with borrowed money that wasn't even rightfully yours to spend. I looked at Michael. And you, my brother, you sat there, pretending to be the voice of reason, while you were benefiting from the very fraud being committed against me. You were just as guilty. Their faces were a mixture of shock, fury, and defeat. They knew they were caught. So, here's how it's going to work, I stated, my voice firm. I have instructed my lawyer, David, to file a formal complaint with the bank regarding the fraudulent nature of this mortgage. Based on your admitted scheme and the evidence we have, the bank will likely have to investigate and potentially nullify the loan in my name, citing fraud and negligence on their part for not verifying the POA properly. Furthermore, I am filing a civil lawsuit against all three of you, my parents, Emily and Michael, for financial fraud, conspiracy, and damages. Mr. Davies tried to object again, but David calmly cut him off. Based on the recording and other evidence, Ms. Peterson's case is very strong, Mr. Davies. A jury will likely see this as a clear case of deliberate, malicious fraud against a family member. The potential penalties could include not just the cancellation of the debt in Sarah's name, but also significant financial judgments against your clients, potentially forcing the sale of their assets, including the old house, to cover damages and legal fees. The color drained from my parents' faces completely. Emily sobbed louder. Michael was staring at the table, defeated. You wanted me to pay the $500,000? I continued, my voice now quiet but laced with steel. Well, now you might lose everything trying to defend yourselves against the consequences of your own actions. You thought you were clever. You thought I was just a piggy bank you could break open. You were wrong. I fought for everything I have, and I will fight even harder to protect it and to get justice. This isn't about money anymore, I said, looking at them one last time. This is about proving that you cannot treat people, even your own family, as disposable tools for your own gain. This is about saying enough is enough. I stood there, breathing deeply. The weight I had been carrying for weeks, months, even years of subtle neglect and blatant manipulation finally felt lighter. I hadn't screamed or lost control. I had calmly, methodically used their own words and actions and my own strength and resources to dismantle their lies and turn the tables completely. The legal battle was far from over after that meeting, but the turning point had been reached. With the irrefutable evidence of the recording and the documentation about the faulty power of attorney, the bank, after their own internal investigation, agreed to a settlement that removed the mortgage from my name entirely, citing fraudulent origination. They pursued legal action against my parents and Emily, and potentially Michael, depending on the specifics of their bank accounts and state laws, to recover their losses, which likely involved foreclosing on the old house. My civil lawsuit against them went forward. While the details of the settlement are confidential, let's just say I received a substantial amount in damages. Not just for the financial stress and legal fees, but for the emotional distress and the systematic way they tried to ruin me. It was compensation for years of feeling like an outsider, culminating in this ultimate betrayal. My parents did lose the old house. Emily's financial situation became even worse, compounded by legal judgments against her. Michael had to deal with his own gambling debts and the legal fallout. Their reputation within the extended family and community was severely damaged once the truth, or at least parts of it, came out. I was financially free from their mess. My reputation, which they tried to tarnish, was restored because the truth was on my side. I built a stronger wall around my life, cutting off contact with my parents, Emily and Michael. It was painful, losing the idea of a family, but the reality of what they were was far more painful to hold on to. I learned that sometimes the hardest thing you have to do is fight against the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. I learned that trust, once broken so fundamentally, is impossible to rebuild. I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it means confronting your deepest fears in your own family, is the only way to truly be free. I am independent, successful, and most importantly, I am at peace. I didn't let them win. I didn't let them define me or dictate my life. I took back control. Now looking back, the question still lingers in the minds of some people who know parts of the story. Even after all they did, the lies, the fraud, the attempts to ruin me, and the consequences they faced. If you were in my position and saw your family lose everything because of the consequences of their own actions against you, would you feel any remorse? Would you regret standing up for yourself so fiercely? If years from now, one of them reached out, truly remorseful, asking for forgiveness and a chance to rebuild, would you choose A, close the door completely and never look back, or B, consider opening a tiny crack, accepting that people can change? What do you think?